We do have wind turbines at the top. Now, this is really, I mean, if you look at the return on investment associated with wind turbines, it doesn't really make necessarily a lot of sense, but it's really more of a gesture. And it was important, I think, to the Chinese government that they do this, even though, you know, it is pretty costly. We'll generate enough wind power to basically light the exterior of the building and the landscaping. So that'll all be handled by wind. I'll tell you, this was an interesting process for me personally, and how you deal with, we're also talking today about how important it is to get engineers from so many different disciplines together now working on things, and what happens as the wind goes around the building and how do you actually make these things work has been a fascinating process. We're using all sorts of sustainable systems, geothermal, cogeneration, ice plants in the basement, waterless toilets. You know, water's a huge issue. I've got another slide in here related to water. Yeah, here we go. In China, clean water is a huge issue in China. So we're recapturing all the water. It will use 40% less water than a conventional high-rise building or super high-rise building. So if you were to model a typical building, it will use 40% less, which is 250 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water a year. And that's an enormous amount of water. Now, this is where engineering to me, I think great architecture is an expression of the design is an expression of not only form but engineering both. And we had this idea about the form, but we didn't know how to maximize the form, and we didn't know what that meant. So we went through all sorts of engineering studies, and we modeled, you know, what happens with what happens with my laser? What happens when you turn the building 90 degrees, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, and you turn it, and a couple things start happening. One is that it starts to distort along its edge. So the more you turn it, the more it distorts because it's a triangular form. So when you're looking at it, the building starts to look like it's going to fall over. And so that obviously visually didn't work. But we work with RWDI on the wind tunnel testing. And they did a multiple test. I think I actually have it in here. Yeah, this is a model. And we built a model for each one of these turns. And we ended up with a 120-degree turn. And basically, it's 120 floors. And so it goes up one floor, turns 1 degree, turns 1 degree, turns 1 degree. And so it turns 120. And what that did is it really minimized the wind loads to a point where, as if you were to compare this to, and our point of comparison was the Hancock building, tapered building, square in form. So we did a comparison in benchmark Hancock against this, and it was like I think it was a 30%, 40% reduction in steel and concrete, and about $50 million in construction costs. So it was a huge savings to really work with the engineers and try to understand how we could maximize this form. We also did a number of tests. This is sort of interesting. I'm going to show you this. I thought you guys might like this. Look at the size of a person here. And this is at Tongji University. And this is a shaking table test that we did. And there were a lot of engineers that said, you know what? This is not necessarily a valid test. It's really hard to simulate what's going to happen. But nonetheless, the government insisted on it. So this simulates an 8.0 earthquake. Now, we're only in an earthquake zone equal to Washington, D.C. But because of the restrictions on super high-rise and the real concerns by the Chinese government that this is going to be a safe, a ultra-safe building, we're designing to seismic codes that would be equal to San Diego. So this is, let's see if I can... This is it. This is an 8.0 earthquake. It's got a tuned mass dampener on the top of the building that is controlled computerized, so as the building leans, it sort of, as the wind pushes it over, it leans back into the wind. So when this test was going on, Bill will appreciate this, I sent an email to everybody saying that the top of the building fell off. And so everybody in the firm was like, oh my God, the top of the building fell off. And then like the next day I sent an email out saying, no, everything's fine. It worked out fine. So what I do have some construction shots that I wanted to show you guys. And we've been documenting this. It's going to be, Discovery Channel is going to do something on it. And there's a number of people that have come forward and want to do some filming. So every month we've been out there actually taking photographs and video. And this is a recent, you know, when you design buildings like this, you never believe that they're going to get built, right? You never believe that they're going to get built. And so this is actually under construction. Let me see if it comes up. This is music for the Chinese government. This is not Stairway to Heaven, but this gives you an idea where we're at. The super columns on the building, which you'll see here, are 9 feet by 15 feet. It's got 106 elevators, a mat foundation. The mat pour is 18 feet thick. And it was a continuous pour, continuous concrete pour, that took 60 hours and about 80 cement trucks constantly pumping concrete, you know, for almost 3 days straight. And no, there's no bamboo scaffolding. There's not much left in China. It's real scaffolding now. Everybody talks about bamboo scaffolding. But it's been an amazing experience. And it's now above ground. And every time I go over there and I look at this thing and I say to myself, you know what? I cannot believe that we are building this thing. It's just amazing. Look at the person, how big. So that's it, guys. I do have, do we have time? Can I show you one quick video of, do you have time? Sure, show you? Okay, I just want to show you, this gives you just a snapshot. I didn't want to go through a bunch of projects, and there are a lot of other work that we're doing in Asia. And I just had the office pull together a quick video because we've got a principals meeting come up next week, and I can play that for you. I think you guys might like it. It gives you an idea of, so let's minimize this. So this, you know, the opportunities in Asia are amazing. And this gives you an idea of some of these projects. This is work that's actually under construction, about 90% of this. We have 47 million square feet under construction. These are I've had a chance to travel to most of these cities and do projects in most of these areas. It varies from, you know, large mixed-use projects. Iris and I were in Xi'an about 3 weeks ago, and we're driving in from the airport. I'm going to talk as you guys look at this. We're driving in from the airport, and I'm looking at my left-hand side, and I see this construction project, and I started counting the number of floors, and I stopped at about 50 floors. And then I started counting the number of towers, and I stopped at 37 towers. One residential complex, 30, 50-story buildings. And my understanding is, from everything I've read, is that China will need 50,000 high-rise buildings in the next 10 years. So even though we have an enormous amount of work going on right now, we're just scratching the surface, and we're not even really on the radar screen we are as a major international architect, but we're not really, don't have a lot of market share, so to speak. And the way the pace of the work is multiple times faster than here. You have to be intuitive, you got to be on your feet, you got to be able to sketch. You know, you go to meetings and you sketch with clients over the dinner table. You know, a lot of the stuff comes out of sketch forms. And this is a wonderful project that I'm working on right now with one of our young architects. This project is Shanghai Pudong Development Bank, one that we completed. I had a chance to work on this one, Shenyang Center in Beijing. China Merchants Bank, their corporate headquarters, under construction right now. Giant Group is another lot of major corporate headquarters work that's being done. I mean, essentially the country is privatizing. Slowly, methodically, the way the Chinese do, but it's all being privatized. Everything essentially is mixed use. Rarely do you do a single office building. Everything's got, you know, at least a housing component. And the idea is that you want to be able to live, you know, and play sort of close to where you work. A lot of resort work down in Hainan in the southern portion of China right now. This is the corporate headquarters for Dow Chemical that we finished about a year ago. And then, of course, you know, our mainstay, where we started at Gensler, was doing interiors work. So we do interiors work, graphic design, branding. I mean, our whole focus is sort of what we call the big D. It's all of design. It's all those things. It's about architecture, but it's a lot more than that. This is the very first interiors project I worked on 10 years ago for Washoe Bank. Haiyu River House, which is Heinz interest, you know, Gerald Heinz, that's their project that we did. Renovation of a building that they took over. And this is a retail area for the Shanghai Tower, which I didn't show in the other presentation, some of the retail work. And then, of course, it's interesting that as a firm, we redefined ourselves when we went to Asia. Here we're known as sort of an interiors firm that, you know, got more into architecture and is doing architecture. Here we are clearly one of the top international design firms in Asia. So it's interesting, when I come back to San Francisco and I'm going after a project, I get Cesar Pelli calling me and say, hey, would you guys be architect of record? Or Gene Cohn or somebody else, and over here we're competing head-to-head with them. And the answer is no, we're not architect of record anymore in the States, but occasionally, but not very often. So we've been able to reposition ourselves. This is a wonderful project that we worked on in Korea. We actually lost it to Skidmore. This, I think, is one of the most beautiful high-rise buildings. It was done by an architect, a young architect in our LA office that's about 26 years old, did that high-rise building. So I guess in the one conclusion I did want to say some things, and that is that I really, really, in my heart of hearts, believe that it all started here. That, you know, I didn't know where I wanted to go to college at the time. I just knew I wanted to be an architect. And I had some good counselors that helped me and said, you know, based on everything you're saying, Lawrence Tech is the place to go. And you know what, somebody asked me today, I think it was Chuck, one of my classmates said, would you have done anything different? I said, absolutely not. I would do nothing different, you know, and if I had taken a different path, I wouldn't have ended up where I ended up. And I think the education that I got here, I think that, you know, I remember all the professors' names. I remember, you know, Harold Binder and George, you know, in a special place in my heart for George Zonars. George helped me when I was in school, you know, hired me when I got out. He didn't even know that I was he saw me in the lobby interviewing. He said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm interviewing. He said, I'll introduce you to Carmen Petrelli. And so I went to go work at Lou Redstone. And then when I worked at Lou Redstone in design, then I got a chance to work with George in interiors. And then when I decided to go to General Motors and go, you know, to try the corporate side of it, George encouraged me to do that. He said, go do this. He said, nothing's permanent. You know, you don't have to stay there. Go. And then when I left GM, not when I left GM, but when I went back from my master's, I talked to George, and he was one of the guys that said, you know what? you know, he wanted me to go to Cranbrook, of course, right? George would, but he said, you know what, if you don't want to go to Cranbrook, go get your MBA. He said, what? I said, I want to be an MBA. He said, go do that. He said, so, and then when it came time to move to California, George was also part of that too. So I've had, you know, Howard Eder and Ferraro and all these folks that, you know, were such an important part of my life and really helped me understand what it meant to be, you know, theoretical and conceptual and a practitioner. And I think that ultimately has been, you know, sort of the power of the degree that I got here. So I really appreciate everybody being here tonight, and I'm here for questions if you guys want to ask questions at all.